This hearing is being convened by electronic means as authorized under Part 14 of the procedure bylaw. And as such, panel members may participate in person or by electronic means. If the panel member attending by electronic means loses connection during the voting process, staff are available to get them back online while the voting process is suspended. The staff contact information has been circulated to you. Video of panel members speaking and vote results will be projected on the live stream when available. And for panel members participating by electronic means in accordance with the procedure bylaw, please ensure that your video is turned on and let the clerks know if you leave the meeting for the purpose of confirming quorum. And clerk, can we have the roll call, please?
Councillor Montague in the chair. Councillor Boyle. Councillor Carr. You have quorum, Chair Montague.
Thank you. We'll start with some opening remarks from Ian Dixon, Council for the City of Vancouver.
Morning, councillors, members of the hearing panel. Just to introduce who's in the council chambers today, witness for the city will be Mr. Koji Miyagi, who's sitting over there, and Mr. Buchanan, who's the applicant, I believe is the gentleman in the mask there, seated just behind Mr. Howell. This is a business license hearing. Your powers to issue a business license are set out in section 275 of the Vancouver Charter. The granting which states that the granting or refusing of a license to an applicant, therefore, and the revocation or suspension of a license which has been granted shall be deemed to be in the discretion of the council, and the council may grant, refuse, revoke, or suspend the license without stating any reasons therefore, save in respect of a licensee who, by reasonable efforts, cannot be found. The council shall not revoke a license without giving the holder thereof an opportunity to be heard. As those of you have sat on these before, there is actually a requirement to provide, despite what the language of the charter says, there is a requirement to state reasons, and those reasons are expressed in the motion that's passed at the end of this hearing. So you have broad powers to either issue or deny a business license. Pursuant to your powers, business licensing powers, the license bylaw has been enacted. Section 4 of that bylaw states, subject to the provisions of this section 4, the chief license inspector shall issue a license to an applicant. So a business license is an as of right issuance, unless there are reasons not to. All applications for licenses pursuant to this bylaw shall be made to the inspector in the form of that, for the form provided for that purpose. On receipt, and then section 3 states that on receipt of an application and before issuing any license thereon, the inspector shall ascertain whether the applicant has at any time within the preceding 5 years been convicted of any offense under any statute of Canada, the province of British Columbia, or elsewhere, or under any bylaw of the City of Vancouver, and the inspector, if of the belief that the nature of the offense relates to the business, trade, profession, or other occupation for which the application has been made, shall refuse to issue the license. If the inspector refuses to issue such license, the applicant may appear before council, who may grant or refuse the application. And I take you to that section because that is the nature of the hearing that you're engaged in this morning. Mr. Buchanan was convicted in December of 2021 of operating a short-term rental business without a license. He has, at that time, he had an just after that, in January, he was issued with a 2022 business license. When it was discovered that there had been, and in fact it was a guilty plea, the conviction, that there was a conviction for a short-term rental license without a license, the chief license inspector canceled the 2022 license because the 2022 license was beyond the jurisdiction of the chief license inspector to issue because of the previous conviction within the last 5 years. The way the legislation is structured, the applicant can then appeal to council, and it is not on this hearing a decision for council about whether the decision was correct or incorrect to cancel that license. That license is canceled, but you are entitled, this is what we would call a de novo hearing or a new hearing to determine whether or not a license should be issued in the circumstances to Mr. Buchanan. So what I'll take you through today is Mr. Miyagi will will provide background as to the cancellation of that license, and then provide some comments about whether, in the view of the chief license inspector, it is appropriate to issue a license to Mr. Buchanan in these circumstances, as he is seeking. At the end of the day, that decision will be for you to decide. I presume that Mr. Buchanan will make submissions stating that he should be issued such a license. So unless there are any questions from the panel with respect to that, I would proceed to calling Mr. Miyagi as the city's first witness and only witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the panel. My name is Koji Miyagi. I'm the Deputy Chief License Inspector for the City of Vancouver. I'm also the Deputy Director of Community Standards, which is an area in DBL, Development, Building, and Licenses. In my area, I oversee 3 enforcement branches that DBL is responsible for. And in one of the areas is called proactive enforcement. And that's the area that investigates short-term rental license activities and compliance. And so my staff in that area have put together this package that you're reviewing today.
So I'll just guide you through the package here. If the panel members and Mr. Buchanan can have the evidence package that's provided by the city, it's just tabs 1 through 11. Mr. Miyagi, you're familiar with Mr. Buchanan and his application for a license for the premises at Suite 414, 180 East 2nd Avenue. Is that correct?
Yes, through the chair, yes, I am.
Right, and at tab 2 of the book, tab 2.
Through the chair, maybe there's no tabs on there, so we have to refer to pages.
Page 5. What's this document?
Yes, this is the timeline of events that our staff have engaged in Mr. Buchanan.
I don't intend to take you through that in detail at this juncture. So over to tab 3.
Page 7.
Oh, sorry, page 7, yes. What's this document?
Yes, so this is the 2022 business license that's issued to Mr. Buchanan. I'd like to note that these documents are self-issued, and so you can go online and issue this to yourself. And hence, you may be wondering, well, why does Mr. Buchanan have a license if we've taken it away? These are issued to him on his own, so he can issue that himself.
So unless something specific is put into the system, the license issues as of right.
That's correct.
And then at what's tab 4 for the panel members, page 8 of the materials?
Yes, through the chair, page 8 is a letter that, through registered mail, that the Chief License Inspector has forwarded to Mr. Buchanan. It's dated April 5th, 2022, and this is the cancellation notice of his 2022 license issued. And in this document, you'll see a reference to bylaw, to the license bylaw, section 4.3, that states what Mr. Dixon had stated earlier about if an individual is found guilty in provincial court on a offense that's related to the short-term rental activity, which is the license that he has, then the Chief License Inspector has to cancel his license. And this is the letter that we forwarded to him on April 5th, 2022.
So just some details about this letter. It was sent by registered mail, is that correct?
That is correct.
And by email?
Yes.
Now, just for clarity, the premises of which the conviction is related is not the East Second premises, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So it was for different premises at 374 East 28th Avenue?
Yes, yes.
And
that
then
is
at the
correct.
bottom here, it says, there's a direction that says you must immediately remove all online listings and advertisements for short-term rentals at this premises and cancel all existing reservations. If you continue to operate a short-term rental accommodation without a valid license, you'll be subject to fines for each offense. And then over the page on 9, it advises on how to request the hearing that we are currently in. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. It is for the 414 182nd East Second Avenue, and that's what the 2022 license is issued for that particular location.
And I'm just going to take you to a different part of the evidence book. For those who have tabs, it's tab 10, but it's also page 80.
Oops. Yes, yes.
And what's this document?
Yes, through the chair, this is a conviction information from the courts. It's an imposition of fine, as it states. So Mr. Buchanan has pled guilty to an offense of operating a short-term rental business without a license. And so on December 10th, 2021, and I make reference to that date because later on I'll come back to it. But on December 10th, 2021, he pled in provincial court a guilty plea, which he was fined $500 for.
And it was your view, I take it from the fact that the letter at page 8 was sent, was that having been convicted, that a conviction for operating a short-term rental without a license was sufficiently connected to any subsequent application for a short-term rental, regardless of the location, that you were unable to issue a license pursuant to the bylaw.
Yes, through the chair, that is exactly correct.
Yeah, I'm going to take you to tab 5, page 10, which is page 10 of the materials. Now, this appears to be a screenshot of an advertisement for a short-term rental. Can you explain what this document is?
Yes, through the chair, these are listings that we found on the Airbnb platform. That's one of the major platforms that lists potential short-term rentals. Now, the bookings or the listings, what Airbnb does is provides a field where you input your valid 2022 license. Now, in this particular case, we have screenshots, and if you look at the date at the lower bottom corner, I don't have my glasses on here, it's dated like June and July. So I'd like to know that this is well after he had received the cancellation information in April, that we continue to see his listings. And just taking you through, it shows how many nights, it talks about the space. If you go to page 13, it talks about reviews, meaning he's booked these facilities at this address without a license in May, in June. There's a couple times that show various months. And later on, I'll be able to explain also further how many other bookings. We do have information, perhaps, and members of council have received that too, that he continues to book this location as of today. In November 2022, and that's the new evidence that we have provided to you. We received 2 reviews. My staff have reviewed this, and since April of 2022, he's continued to book this. He has 6 in April, 4 in May, 5 in June, 7 in July, 6 in August, 4 in September, 7 in October, 2 in November. And this is with a canceled license. So he has an illegal operation that he continues to defy the bylaw. And the reviews that I provided to you are evidence to show that the activities are ongoing at this location, that he has a canceled license.
Okay, I'm just going to take you to tab 6, which is, starts at page 14. And this is another document that appears to relate to the listing. Can you explain this document, Council, please?
Yes, through the chair, this information on page 16, uh,
14.
14, sorry, 14 and
14 and
15.
15.
14 and 15. If I take you to the photo of the bathroom, that shows, that matches the listing photo that I showed you earlier in the package, just prior, in the Airbnb. So that's the same bathroom. So we connect the two. This is information that we received from another software where it links the bookings or the listings online, and then it tracks how many nights it's been booked. And if I take you to the lower right-hand corner, you see that there are, now this was printed in May of 2022. And so therefore, it stops at May, but I just showed you that he's continued to list into November of this year. But even in this document, it shows that he's listed in May, or he has bookings in May a number of times, and then into April. And if I take you to page 15, now, in January to April, granted, he had received the license, which he printed out on his own and applied for. So if we disregard those, you see that December 2021, he has 4 documented stays. I'd like to note that this is in December 2021. Now, later on, I'll show you that he took possession of this property in October 2021. With that said, the license in question here that we were suspending and canceled is for January, starting in January 2022. Our information shows that he started booking this location without a license in December of 2021. So continued defiance of the bylaw and information that we've provided for him to cease and desist on operations. He's continued to ignore those and book these illegal short-term rental locations.
Okay. And then tab 7, page 16. There's some land title information. What's this?
Yes, through the chair, this is a title search that the city of Vancouver is able to do, and there's a lot of information here, but I think the key point is the first row, if you will, application for registration received on October 6, 2021, and it's also it shows that he's taken possession October 6, 2021. The registered owner, it shows as Mr. Gary Andrew Buchanan. And he lists his other address where he was suspended with for illegal operations, 749 31st Street. So that's his residence, or that's a residential address that he's located, is identified. This takes possession of his 414 180 East Second. So without operating for a license, there's possibility that he's also not living there as well, which is also a breach of the bylaw. But in this particular case, we are forefronting the fact that he is not able to, he has a canceled license. That's the point that we wanted to enforce here.
All right. And at page 25, tab 8. This is an order. This is an older order dated October the 2nd, 2019. Is that correct?
Yes, through the chair, this is an October 2nd, 2019 dated order. It'll list another person here, How H. Lan, Miss Lan. Our understanding is that they were married or they are married, and they may not be now. But at that time, Miss Lan and Mr. Buchanan, who, according to our information, reside at 3949 Prince Edward Street, was illegally operating short-term rental without a license. at 751 East 31st Avenue. And the order, if you,
Is this the order that that resulted in the in the guilty plea?
this, I believe, is not the address. The guilty plea is for another location, the 374 East 28th, I believe.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
So it's
Um,
yet another address.
Correct. So just at a high level, shows a number of locations that Mr. Buchanan has been involved with and has had our attention for multiple years. This particular order uh, tells you essentially to say that you don't have a license there, so please stop operating. And it's accompanied, if I take you to page 28, by two bylaw violation notices. That they're tickets, they're $1,000 each. One is to Mr. Buchanan and one is to Ms. Lamb for operating without a license. And then on 29, page 29, it shows the evidence that, that we see a suite, appears to be a basement suite at 751 East 31st Avenue, which we see advertised at the short-term, at Airbnb platform with a number of people have said that stayed there, so on and so forth. So therefore, we had asked, we provided an order for cease and desist to operate without a license.
So as you're aware, Mr. Miyagi, the nature of this hearing today is for council to determine whether or not a license should be issued for the East Second property going forward, as the chief license inspector cannot issue one based on the bylaw. Can you provide for council, for the panel, your thoughts and whatever evidence you have or information that you have with respect to Mr. Buchanan's short-term rental operations over the recent past, and whether you would recommend him getting a license?
Yes, thank you. And through the chair, the city has spent enormous amount of resources dealing with Mr. Buchanan and Ms. Lan to a certain period of time, but it dates back to 2019 on our record. And just to summarize the various addresses that we've cited here, Mr. Buchanan tends to show a pattern of behavior here where he's non-compliant by not obtaining a license. Now, he has tried to obtain a license a few times, or one time anyways, prior to this one, which was denied, and it's in this package, which, and I won't go into too much details of that particular piece, but it was denied because he admits he didn't live there in the suite. And so therefore, no, well, you can't have a license because the bylaw says you have to live there. But, you know, he was pointing out that, well, why can't I rent a suite in the basement in my house? Well, because you have to live there. And he didn't live there. He lived upstairs. So the three addresses, I'd like to summarize, is 374 East 28th Avenue, 751 East 31st Avenue, and then currently 414 180 East 2nd Avenue, which is a brand new condo or a fairly new condo on 2nd Avenue, as the listings will show. I'd like to take you back to point number one for me, which is Mr. Buchanan pled guilty in provincial court when the city prosecuted him. And prosecution is the last step in our fairly long compliance process. We tried to achieve voluntary compliance. And if you recall, he's been giving lots of notices in terms of please stop operating. The order that we were sent, and then there's warnings involved and whatnot. But for the 374 East 28th Avenue on December 10th, 2021, he pled guilty, which we've shown you on page 80. Now, with this guilty plea conviction, he continues to run another illegally run SDR, which is this 414 180 East Second Avenue. That's the address in question. So with the guilty plea in December 10th, 2021, I've just pointed out to you in a previous tab that in December of 2021, he continued to operate an illegal STR, even though he pled guilty to another, and granted it was a different location. Now, in April, as we mentioned, the CLI 2022 sent a letter saying, look, because of the court order or the court decision with a guilty plea, you are not eligible to have a license. That was in April 2022. And as we've shown, he has continued to book this facility even to this month, which is when we have the hearing. So he is still operating, to our understanding, 414 180 East Second Avenue. And I guess from a city enforcement standpoint, I find that incredibly egregious and a defiance of the bylaw. We have over 3,000 people that are licensed with short-term rentals, and they all comply and follow the order and follow the bylaw as it's indicated. And I am at a loss to why Mr. Buchanan continues to defy the bylaw. In the past history, we've briefly touched on some of his violations. On now, he was a co-owner of these, and he still may be a co-owner of these locations. But 751 East 31st Avenue, there was a $1,000 ticket issued to him, which I've shown, and to this day it hasn't been paid. And then in 374 East 28th Avenue, we also issued a BVN, so that's a bylaw violation notice, which later on he pled guilty in provincial court. So he's received $2,000 himself worth of violation tickets, 2 different locations. We haven't issued one for the 414 because we knew that this was coming to a hearing. And I'd like to point out, if we go to page 76, I think we may have touched on this one, but this is a warning letter dated July 6, 2020. This is an example of information that we send out to advise. So this is not an abrupt process that we have. We provide lots of information for people to comply. Now, this order happens to be for 374 East 28th Avenue. Yes, and so with the new evidence that we have and respecting the panel's time, I won't take you to a lot of the details of the information or the emails that transpired back and forth. The key points have been highlighted through Mr. Dixon's cross-examination, and I'm just wanting to reiterate certain points. I guess I would like to just add that we have been dealing with Mr. Buchanan for quite some time now. I believe he is familiar with the bylaw over this period of time. He's met the extreme compliance process, if you will, and that's being prosecuted and going to court. And to this day, he defies the court. His pleading guilty in court is serious, in our opinion, and yet he still continues to operate without a license, which I guess, as I mentioned, is difficult for me to comprehend. And so for those reasons, we feel that the city administration feels, with the time and effort and the information we put together, that we hope that the panel will support the chief license inspector's decision of cancellation of his current license. and follow the licensing bylaw recommendation of non-licensed for 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the panel have any questions for the witness? Councillor Boyle, I see you in the queue.
Thanks. I have a few questions. My first is, would the, and forgive me, I'm always trying to remember the appropriate language, the licensee have known when the guilty conviction was issued that made him ineligible for 5 years to get a new license?
Oh, for me? No. Through the chair, I can't speak to what he knows exactly at that time, although there is dialogue that dates back to September of 2021. So this is prior to his guilty plea, but he was going to court. There is dialogue with our clerks that go back and forth where Mr. Buchanan asks if why would his license be denied if he's under a court proceedings. And during that conversation, I believe we would have explained, or we may have explained to him, the ramifications of pleading guilty in court.
Okay, so reapplying or applying for a license that was incorrectly issued in 2022, the rules were laid out that he wouldn't have been able to go online and apply for that license given the previous.
Yes, through the chair, the license bylaw is stated in there, and that has been altered, and that's always been referred to. I guess the other point that I'd like to point out is that his wife or his ex-wife, Miss Lan, was provided with a court guilty sentence or order, if you will, and in that particular quarter, it says right there that she's banned for operating short-term rentals for 1 year, and that's through the court. So that's separate to what we have. But in that particular instance, I'm thinking that because it was his wife or ex-wife, it was the same location that they co-owned, that he would have been familiar with the ramifications of going to court.
Okay, great. Do we know if this East Second address is the licensee's primary address?
Through the chair, we do not, we intend to further investigate if for some reason that he is offered an opportunity to continue there. At this time, and given the time and resources that is involved, the fairly straightforward was that you pled guilty in court, and so therefore the chief license inspector cannot issue a license. But we suspect he does not live there. We suspect he lives in one of these other locations, and if he does somehow gets a license, we would do a full investigation to see if he actually has the principal residency requirement.
Okay. I'll leave my questions there for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Carr, you have the floor.
Thank you. There are other addresses that have been listed in the documents that we have. 753 East 31st Avenue, 751 East 31st Avenue, with statements that there were 4 business violation notices and 2 orders issued for unlicensed short-term rentals. Do I have that information correct?
Through the chair, yes, that is correct. So the 4 BVNs, or the business or bylaw violation notices, that's 2 for Mr. Buchanan and 2 for Miss Lan. And then the 2 orders show 1 order for the 1 address and another order for the other
Can you
address.
explain what an order is?
Yes, through the chair, and if I'm wrong, Mr. Dixon, maybe you can jump into. An order is through the authority that the city is granted through the charter, and then via the bylaw that supports it, the charter. um, Certain individuals in the city have authority to issue an order. So in this particular case, the chief license inspector, and in her absence, the deputy chief, which is myself, could issue an order. The order is a, it's not a request, but it's an order. It's, I guess, in a harsh way, it's a demand to say, look, you are breaking the law. And so therefore, we will give you a certain period of time to comply. Failure to comply will further your prosecution, or further the enforcement, which would lead to, in this particular case, prosecution. But an order, and we use an order, the chief building officer will use an order, the chief license inspector uses an order, and these are used in bylaw circumstances to obtain compliance.
Okay, and what was the order or the law that, that he was not in compliance with? Like, what was the law he was breaking?
Yes, through the chair, that would be the short-term rental bylaw.
Okay,
And, or, sorry, it would also be the licensing bylaw where you're operating a business without a license.
okay, so there were no short-term rental licenses for the two addresses I stated, 753 East 31st, 751 East 31st?
That is correct. No valid licenses.
No valid, okay, there were, yes, I find it curious that somebody can print out a license that looks exactly like a real license. How does that happen?
Through the chair,
It's a real license.
Oh, it is?
It's a real license. It's just not, there's no verification procedure. So you print it out, so that all business licenses operate like that in the city of Vancouver. You just print them out for yourself.
Okay, but it wasn't, but the licenses, which we saw copies of in the book, were not real. Can you explain to me why they were not real licenses
through the chair, and apologize
or valid?
if I wasn't clear. The short-term rental license issuing process is an online process. And so an individual who follows the fields and acknowledges certain acknowledgements will then, and then pays the fee, will automatically be issued a license. So in this, and there is no catch where if, for example, Mr. Buchanan's been a frequent flyer with us in the past, the system won't catch that. And so if he applies, then you'll get one. That's how the licenses are issued. So what he has in 2021 is from January to April 2nd, and April 2nd is when the CLI had said, no, we're going to cancel it. During that period of time, arguably, he had a valid license. We say that it's not a valid license after that because we canceled it.
Okay,
And yet he continues to book. And then, or it continues to list on Airbnb and other platforms, which means you would have to occupy a field in Airbnb where it says a valid license number, and you would have to lie to put that in there.
got it.
Um,
Got it. And to get a license for short-term rental, do you have to declare that that is your primary residence?
Yes, through the chair, through an application process, it says stated very clearly, is this your place of residence?
Right.
And you have to say yes, and you have to verify that you've answered these correctly. So that's one fail-safe. It's also stated very clearly in the bylaw that it has to be your primary residence. It provides examples of what that is defined as. We also do a document search to verify when's. Now this is in Mr. Buchanan's case, he would have had a number of opportunities to know these steps because we denied him of a license earlier in a previous year, saying we don't think you live there, and he stated himself that, well, I don't live in the basement, but I'm renting it out. What's wrong with that? Blah blah blah. So there's those conversations that's occurred in the past. So in this particular case, yeah, that is also a requirement that you do need to, we call it NPR. This is non-primary residence. And he was guilty of those in our mind in the past for non-primary residence. And in this particular case, we suspect he would be as well, although we haven't shown evidence of that in this particular timeframe.
Okay. But a person cannot have a primary residence at different locations at the same time. Is that right?
Through the chair, yes, that's absolutely correct. And that was council passed, and that is the backbone of our short-term rental program, is that this has to be your primary residence.
Okay. On a different question, the city staff canceled, sorry, the city staff cannot issue a license because of our city charter that says once there's been a conviction in court, a license can't be issued. Is that correct?
So through the chair, the license bylaw, section 7.4, I think it was, states, and it's in that letter, yes, that the license bylaw, section 4.3, sorry, the city's license bylaw number 4450, and it states in 4.3 that of the belief that the nature of the offense relates to the business, trade, profession, or other occupation for which the application has been made, shall refuse to issue the license.
Not may, but shall.
Shall, yes, well, shall, and according to our legal direction from Mr. Dixon, the chief license inspector in this particular case, in terms of how the language is worded, has to cancel the license.
Right.
The appeal process is a step where perhaps that could be reconsidered.
Okay, Mr. Biaggi, at the beginning, you said a decision has to be made, and the decision is to whether or not to uphold the decision of the chief license inspector to issue a license. So my understanding is that the chief license inspector can't issue a license. So is it the truth that it would be, in this case, city council that would or would not issue a license, or, yeah, is it?
Through the chair, yes, that would be the case. That would be the panel, which is the representative council, would then render that decision and overturn, because the chief license inspector in this particular case, by law, cannot issue a license.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you. That's it for my questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. I do have a couple of quick questions myself. How's the best way to ask this, I guess? Is there a field when you apply for a short-term rental license? I understand it's something you do on your own, online, but is there, in those fields that you mentioned, is there anything that asks the person who's requesting that license about anything that would make them ineligible, or if they've been convicted of an offense, or if they're aware of the bylaw, that sort of thing?
Through the chair, there is, to my understanding, no indication of that in the application process. That says that if you've been previously convicted of or pled guilty, that type of language, it is not on there. There are other things to do with primary residency and providing documentation and the requirements to provide information when requested. All those things are in there. And but I do not believe that that particular court one is in there. With that said, these are not frequent occurrences. And so most of the applicants would not necessarily come across this circumstance.
Okay, that's my only question. Thank you. Seeing no other questions from the panel, does the licensee, Mr. Buchanan, do you have any questions for this witness?
Should I go through my
Yeah.
petitions and
If you-
No, the procedure is that if you have any specific questions for Mr. Miyagi, you ask those now, and then you. Okay, he would move over and then, well, one of you can go one place. Yeah.
I have some submissions. Should I hand these to the councilors now?
Whenever you like.
Should I just,
Hang. You should go to the clerk first. How many copies are there?
oh, Miyagi. Okay.
So, Mr. Buchanan, do you have any questions for the witness? Just, I guess we'll start with
Yes.
that.
So when you apply for a license online, can you put any name on that license?
Through the chair, technically, yes, but on a moral side of things, no, because it says right there when you apply to be very truthful or in reference to that. And it also says that what you submit, you admit to be correct.
So, but for example, I could take out a business license and add my name, Counselor Boyle's name, and I would get a license with my name and Counselor Boyle's name on it?
Through the chair, you would get a license issued, but technically that's not a valid license because the truth hasn't been told yet.
So that's not a valid license then?
It should not be a valid license if you falsified information on there.
And also, so you mentioned that I was fined in court $1,000. And
No.
then there's also, you mentioned $2,000 in fines. And you said I'm not sure what the $2,000 is. I was, and you said they weren't paid, but I have paid. I went to the courthouse and I paid, I was gonna pay $1,000 because I thought that's what the fine was. And they said, no, you only owe $500. And I said, are you sure? And they double checked. And I paid and I got a receipt. So I did pay for that fine. Is there any way you can verify that?
So through the chair, what I stated was that you paid a $500 court fine. That's a provincial court fine. So that's that's stated in the evidence package. The bylaw violation tickets, notices that you got, which we have evidence of in the evidence package, those are $1,000 each. And to my understanding, and you received two, Ms. Lands received two, and to my understanding, those have not been paid. So hence $2,000 has not been paid by you.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that. So there was a lot of information given out, but there's a lot of stuff that's been missing. So there's been ongoing communications between me and Mr. Dixon and Mr. Robert LeBlanc in the prosecutor's office. We've emailed, phone calls, many with the short-term rental offices. And so the first thing I would address is these address 749, 753, and 751 East 31st Avenue. So,
Sorry, Mr. Buchanan.
Mr. Buchanan, can we just from a procedural point of view, are you finished with your questions for Mr. Miyagi and you're now going into your submissions? Is that what's happening now?
okay, give me 1 minute. Make sure I covered that.
No worries, yes, we could just finish up with the witness first, and then we'll.
Okay, yeah.
Yours.
So also, when you apply for a business license, I've tried to get the application forms for those licenses, but I was told that there are no, there's no copies of that information. Do you keep the applications for business licenses?
Through the chair, those are done online. And I would have to say, I'm not sure if, well, I know we don't print those out after individuals apply. I'm not sure, we would have to talk to IT. I'm not as familiar with the system where if the previous applications are, the information in the fields are kept by us. I don't have knowledge of that. All I know is that if the information that's put in there and then it goes through, then you will get a license printed out, or you don't.
So is there a record of the application forms? Just yes or no?
I guess the question is, I don't know.
So you've mentioned it's possible to put anyone's name on the application form. Would the city have anything to do if there's two property owners and one person takes out a license and puts someone else's name that's on that property? Would the city investigate if that other person approved that license or authorized or knew about it or wanted to be part of that?
So through the chair, the city would investigate a falsified information if we're made aware of that. You have to understand there's thousands of applications.
So, sorry to cut you off. To be specific, I'm just talking about myself.
Okay. And if
So
I can ask you a
there's a
question.
business license that was issued for 374 East 28th Avenue in two people's names. Did the city verify that I authorized that?
For which license are you referring to?
There's two licenses issued for license number 201617773 and 1919277 for 374 East 28th Avenue.
Okay. Sorry, and are you asking if we investigated?
Yes, how can you confirm that I authorized to be on a license?
So in
Since
those
you-
cases.
You don't have the application form information. You don't verify who signs up. I can put anyone's name on the application when I register, but there's no way to verify that I was authorized to be on that application or that license, both of those.
Through the chair, we verify. So the answer is yes, we do verify. And for those licenses, yes, we have verified. And those are the reasons why those licenses either have been canceled or suspended. Those are the reasons why you had to go to court or Ms. Land had to go to court. Those are the reasons why through the dialogue with our clerks, we verify that either you are involved or you are not involved. Now, the bylaw states that the property owner is responsible for the activities of those illegal short-term rentals. So regardless of what's on the license, you're also in that particular case, you received a BVN, the bylaw violation notice, because you and Ms. Land were the property owners. The property owner is responsible for what happens at your property. And if you are operating illegally on there, then yes, you are responsible for that, and that's what the investigations show. The license itself was also investigated through a number of conversations and dialogue with you, and verified that either it was your application, or in one case, Ms. Land, she canceled her license when we investigated her. So yes, we do investigate.
Okay, so can you point me to the information that shows where you verified that I authorized to be on a license? Is it in your packet of information here?
That specific information is not in there, no.
Why is it not in here?
Because it's through the investigation, it's implied that it's your license.
It's implied, but it's not verified. You said it was verified.
Through our
Implied and
investigation.
verified are two different things.
No, the license itself, because you printed it out.
No, don't say the word you. Somebody might have printed it out.
Well,
You don't know who printed it
To
out.
our understanding, you printed it out, and
When you say you, are you referring to me, Gary Buchanan?
yes.
How do you know I printed it out?
Well, if you didn't print it out, why are you here today?
I think that they're talking about different licenses.
Well, I'm just asking, how does he know if I printed out a license? That's what I don't understand.
Through the chair, when the CLI sends you a letter to say that this is your license, you could have easily, if it's not your license, you could have easily have said that it's not, but that's not what you said.
So on the licenses, 20161-773 and 19192-747, what email addresses do you have on that license?
I'm sorry, I don't have that information here in front of me. We're talking about 414, 180 East Second. So that particular addresses, we have supporting information.
Mr. Miyagi, I'm talking about these two licenses, not 414. It's a straightforward question. You could just answer it. That would be great.
It's not in this package, no.
So where is that information?
Likely with our clerks.
So why wouldn't it be here today?
As those two addresses are not in question today.
Well, they are in question.
Sorry.
Mr. Buchanan, and to the chair, I don't understand how this is relevant at this juncture. If perhaps Mr. Buchanan could.
Well, these are my questions, Mr. Dixon. You don't have to
And I'm
understand why they're
entitled to
relevant.
ask
I'm trying to
whether-
get some information, Mr. Dixon.
Mr.
As you know, I'm
Mr.
speaking.
Buchanan,
I'm speaking now, Mr. Dixon. You're
I-
interrupting me.
you interrupted me.
You spoke earlier. I didn't interrupt you at all.
Mr. Buchanan, maybe I can help clarify here. You were speaking about the licenses that were issued to your addresses at 374 and East 28th and 751 East 31st. That's
no,
your
right,
question
so
to Mr. Miyagi?
I'm specifically referring to two licenses from two different years for 374 East 28th Avenue.
Okay, for the one address, but not the address on Second Avenue.
Not referring to that as of now.
Okay, is there a specific reason? And if so, I'll give you a little bit of leeway, but is there a specific reason that you're asking about those licenses when we're here for?
Yes, there is. So
If we
I
could
didn't
get there
apply for
quickly.
those licenses. I never authorized those licenses. There's no evidence to show that I did. Mr. Miyagi can't even provide the email that he was corresponding with the other person on the license. Those were the licenses that we went to court and I pled guilty. Now, what happened, we'll get into why I pled guilty. And
Okay, so if we'll get into that into your submissions, but if we can maybe just stick to the questions that the witness can answer with regards to the business license that was issued and revoked on the Second Avenue address, that would be great.
well, the thing is, the reason the 414 is in question is because I pled guilty. When I pled guilty, I didn't understand the long-term implications of pleading guilty. I thought pleading guilty just meant I was going to pay a fine. And there's more information about that that Mr. Dixon didn't get into or Mr. Miyagi didn't get into.
Okay, and that's fair enough, but we can get into some questions from the panel regarding that after your submissions. But what we need to do is ask questions of the witness with regards to this specific business license. If you want to provide an explanation, that we can get to at a later time. So if we could deal with specific questions to this witness regarding this business license, that would be fantastic.
So, Mr. Miyagi, if someone's running a short-term rental and there's two people on the license, how can one person stop that license for that short-term rental?
That's a speculative question. I don't understand how Mr. Miyagi could possibly answer that.
Yeah, could you maybe reframe your question, Mr. Buchanan?
Um, Is it possible for someone to have, nothing, I guess that's all my questions for that address. For Mr. Miyagi for now.
Okay, are there any questions from the panel to the City of Vancouver Council?
We're actually over to submissions.
Submissions?
For testimony and submissions from Mr. Buchanan. I assume he doesn't have witnesses other than himself.
Okay. Mr. Buchanan, so now is your opportunity to provide your submissions and provide your story.
Okay, so I'm referring to the front of this, just the timeline of events, the submissions that I gave to you, so I'm on first page. So this is, well, first thing I'll start is so there's a few addresses that were mentioned. So I was living at 749 East 31st Avenue, and then I was renting out I got a business license to rent out the basement suite as an Airbnb. And that was going on, and then the city contacted me and said I couldn't run that as an Airbnb because I had an upcoming court case. So I asked for them to show me the policy that says I can't run an Airbnb because of an upcoming court case, which the implication would be that I'm guilty. So we went back and forth and with emails and stuff, and they suspended my license for that address. And then after they couldn't prove that there was any reason to cancel my license, they reinstated the license. And then again, they came back and they said I couldn't rent it out because I wasn't actually living in that suite. It's part of the same house, but it's a separate address. And so I ended up canceling that license. And then the other address was a laneway on the same property, which I didn't understand the rules, and I canceled that license. So both of those I voluntarily canceled. I was under the impression I could run an Airbnb. So, going back to the beginning, there was Airbnb license for 374 East 28th issued with my name on it. And if you go so I never applied for this license, never agreed to it, and my name was unilaterally added by however it was added. So I had nothing to do with the property. And Mr. Dixon in the prosecutor's office knows in detail what's going on. And they know I have no control over that property through court order. And I've never approved this Airbnb. And then I asked the person that got the license to cancel the Airbnb, and they wouldn't. Then I called Airbnb and told them I'm an owner on the property and I want this Airbnb account canceled or the listing pulled, whatever they do. And that's when they told me they don't get involved in that kind of stuff. They can't do anything. And then so then there's nothing I could do. And then I went to the rentals board and they also said there's nothing that can be done. And later on, when I knew I was going to court, then I knew I had to get this in writing. So if you're at paragraph number 5 on the first page, I emailed Airbnb to get written confirmation May 2021 for upcoming court case on June 22nd, 2021. And if you go to Exhibit B, which is on page 2, So if you, I'll just read it. Hi Airbnb, I, Gary Buchanan, own a property with the other homeowner at 3740 East 28th in Vancouver, British Columbia. I do not have control over this property or the Airbnb account. The other owner allegedly has an illegal Airbnb listing and I want to shut it down. I've received a summons to appear in court on this matter and may be fined or arrested if I do not show up at court. I am asking Airbnb to remove the listing immediately. I have attached my summons as proof. And the last one is kind of cut off. And then I just say, I talked to the City of Vancouver prosecutor, Robert LeBlanc, May 25th, 2021, and he confirmed the ad is still active, and he stated the fines might increase in, sorry, I can't read that part, might increase, I guess, over time or something, for the duration. Or, and then Airbnb responded. They said, thank you for your quick response. It's greatly appreciated. As far as I know, there is no problem with your listing. I was just passing on the letter that was sent to us, asking for that listing to be taken down. We cannot and do not take sides in issues like this. We just pass the message on through to the other party as is requested by the complainant. What you do with that letter is up to you. So there's a, that shows you Airbnb couldn't do anything about it. And again, I've been in constant contact with Ian Dixon and Robert LeBlanc, and they knew I didn't have control over this property, and I wasn't a willing participant in this license. And then, and they still chose to prosecute. So if you go to, sorry, page 4, I'll just read some more from Airbnb. My name is Tamara. I work here at Airbnb. We received the attached communication regarding your listing from the other homeowner. Per policy, we are passing it along to you. Please remember that hosts must review their local laws and agreements before listing a space on Airbnb. By accepting our terms of service and activating a listing, you represent that you will follow local laws and comply with other third-party rules that bind you, such as a lease or HOA co-op rules. If you need to make any adjustments to your account after reviewing this letter, such as deactivating your listing or canceling upcoming reservations, please let me know and I will assist you. So this account, this Airbnb account, I also had no control over, didn't have the password or any access to it, and there's nothing I could do. Airbnb couldn't do anything. So and then, so we, moving forward, so if you go down to paragraph 7, the City of Vancouver Prosecutor's Office is aware of the situation that was going on with this address and that I had no control over the property. And there's been ongoing phone calls and emails from myself to Robert LeBlanc and Ian Dixon. And even with this information, they chose to continue prosecuting myself. So I went to court June 22nd, 2021, and I was going to plead not guilty with reasons. Some of them stated here. And at that court hearing, Ian Dixon, he kept asking me outside the courtroom. He asked me 4 times how I was going to plead. And I'm not sure why he was doing that. So, and then we got into the courtroom, and well, one thing Ian Dixon asked, he asked how I was going to plea, and then he he said that I could get a $5,000 fine for each occurrence, so up to a $10,000 fine if I plead not guilty and they find that I am guilty. So I asked him if he was trying to intimidate me, and he said no. And so we went into the courtroom, and then I asked,
Sorry, I have to interrupt for a moment. I'm uncomfortable proceeding with the hearing any further at this point. Given that I'm here in my role as counsel and aspersions are being cast upon things that I did or may have done at a time which, quite frankly, I don't recall. It's difficult for me to function in my role as counsel at this point, so I'm going to ask that this matter be adjourned.
no.
At this time, if Mr. Buchanan wishes to continue making these assertions, and other counsel will have to continue with this hearing.
I guess I'm having an issue too with, we're dealing with a business license for an address on Second Avenue. And I understand that part of your defense or part of your explanation has to do with business licenses that were issued to other properties previously. But I do have an issue with you providing information or providing testimony on, I guess I'll call it hearsay is the best way to put it, a conversation between you and Mr. Dixon that may or may not be relevant, may or may not have happened. If you had witnesses to that conversation, maybe we could proceed. I don't know, Mr. Dixon, if are you,
Okay, yeah, I apologize.
willing
I
to
didn't-
continue or able to continue if
Yeah, I
we
can
moved on
continue without
past?
talking about any of that stuff.
That's fine. It's just that, obviously I would testify to that too, and it's inappropriate for me to testify if I'm continuing.
Exactly,
If he's not
right.
relying on that for anything, that's fine. That I'm happy to continue.
So, Mr. Buchanan, if you want to continue with your explanation, that's great. But any conversations that you
Yes.
had with Mr. Dixon would probably be inappropriate.
Yes, I understand.
Okay.
So so June 22nd, 2021, that's when I found out that the other property owner had been subpoenaed and was ready to testify. It was then that I changed my plea to a guilty plea because we're getting separated and I didn't want to create any more conflict. And that was a mistake. I didn't understand what was going to happen by pleading guilty. Like I think I said earlier, I thought it was just pleading guilty and I'm going to pay some fines and be done with it. I didn't realize the long-term consequences that I wouldn't be able to run an Airbnb for 5 years. And also, I've been trying to get, so I'm going down to paragraph 12 now. So there was a hearing originally set on June 14th, 2022, and I requested in advance that the prosecutor's office provided further information, which they did finally provide on late Friday, June 10th, the Friday before the hearing, which was on Monday. And I didn't have enough time to prepare, and the information was incomplete. So we canceled that hearing. And then that same day, June 14th, 2022, I made a Freedom of Information request through the City of Vancouver's Freedom of Information Office. And you can see, if you go to, wait one sec here. So if you go to Exhibit D, which is page 15A, the main points, you'll see I made a request on June 14th, 2022 for a bunch of information. And then the city, normally a Freedom of Information Act request is fulfilled within 30 business days on receipt of a request. And the city, for some reason, needed an extension of about 8 months. So I still don't have that information. And they have until February 17th, 2023 to provide that information. So that from June 14th to February 17th, that's an extremely long time to wait for information, and that would have been helpful for today's hearing, and it would have also been helpful for the, for the hearing. I'm not sure why it's taking so long. And then paragraph 16 on my timeline, you'll see that they're still trying to prosecute me over short-term rentals on a property I have no control over. And if you go to give me a moment here. So if you go to the city's packet of information on page 6, I think. So on May 18th, 2022, this property, I still have no control over it per court order. And again, the city's saying there's an order was issued to myself and the other homeowner for an unlicensed short-term rental at the East 28th Avenue address. And the city, they know I have no control over that, so I don't know why they're still coming after me for that. That seems, I did talk to a lawyer about that, and they, well, I won't say what they said, but they said they shouldn't be doing that, basically.
Give you a few more moments there, Mr. Buchanan, to flip through your notes, but let me know if you're done with your submissions, and
Okay, yeah.
we can move on to questions.
Sorry, yeah, I'll just give me a couple minutes.
Sure, no problem.
And I guess the last thing I'll point the counselors to, panel, is page 20, Exhibit F. And this is an email from the city. It's got a box around it. I've been advised that if applications are completed online, the city does not save copies of them. And then further on the page 21, I'm asking, can you send the application form that was signed to get these licenses? And then the city just says attached are the business licenses. And then the last email, again, I'm asking for the application forms. And then there's no, the last email is November 17th, 2022, 3 p.m. And there's been no response to that. So basically to sum up, so I wasn't part of this East 28th short-term rental. I was, I pled guilty when I shouldn't have pled guilty. And now that's affected this current license. So if I didn't plead guilty, this current license would be valid as I have approval to have an Airbnb in this building. And the other two properties that were mentioned, I canceled both of those licenses myself when I found out I wasn't allowed to run them. So I believe that's the end of my submissions.
Thank you, Mr. Buchanan. Does the panel have any questions? Oh, Councillor Boyle, I see you there. You have the floor.
Yes, just wondering what your current primary address is.
It's 414 East 20th or East 2nd Avenue. 414-180 East 2nd Avenue.
And what's the status of these properties on 31st and 28th?
The 31st property is sold. I don't own that. And the East 28th, I still am an owner to it, and I have no control over it per court order.
Okay. Okay, that's all my questions.
And, one more thing I'd like to add. I don't know if anyone knows this, but I just found this out. If you have a property in two people's names, one of them signs a rental agreement, and then the one person moves out, so it's you and the property, and there's a tenant that you didn't sign the rental agreement with. It was a person that moved out signed it. You have no control over that tenant. So this happened to me. There's a tenant in the laneway, and I wasn't paying the rent, damaged the property. It was furnished. He was put my furniture outside, and it was getting ruined. And long story short, I couldn't even evict him. I couldn't do anything. Any communications. He told me to talk to the person he had a rental agreement with. And I went to the rental board, and they said, there's nothing you can do, even though it's your own property. So
Okay,
I was just...
those are all my questions, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle. Councillor Carr, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thanks very much. The rental that was the subject of the Supreme Court, the court decision in BC, 374 East 28, do you co-own that?
Yes.
Okay. And the advertise, it was rented?
Yes.
Okay. And whose name or contact information appeared on the Airbnb listing?
It was the other property owner's information only.
Only
It was the other property owner's account, which I had no access to.
Right. Okay. As far as you understand the situation, was there a short-term rental business license for that address?
I know there was a license, but whether it was illegal or not. When I became aware of it, that it was an illegal, then I tried to stop it as I went through my timeline. I tried to stop it with the account holder. Then I went through Airbnb and they couldn't do anything. And so basically anything that happens on that property, I'm getting persecuted for, even though I have no control over it.
But you are a co-owner?
Yes.
Right, okay.
And I just found a lot of this information out that quite incredible. As the owner, you have very little control over if someone else has agreements, tenancies, any type of tenancy agreement. Without your name on it, you have no control over it.
Right. And the address 414 180 East 2nd, you're the sole owner?
Pardon me?
The address at, on East 2nd?
Yes. I'm the owner. I'm the only one on title.
Sole owner.
Sole owner, yes.
Okay. Okay. My questions, thank you.
Thank you. I see no more questions in the queue from panel. Mr. Dixon, do you have questions?
I have no questions.
No questions. In that case, we'll move to our closing submissions by Mr. Dixon.
Panel's heard the extensive history, and obviously Mr. Buchanan has testified that he had some difficulties and attests that he did not have any control over the previous Airbnb. However, he did plead guilty to operating an Airbnb without a license at that location, which is evidence that effectively under oath he told the court that he had that control. And I ask that the panel bear that in mind, despite what he said this morning. He did plead guilty. There are defenses available. The situation that he described would likely have been sufficient to have him found not guilty had he run that to trial. His explanation, frankly, to me makes limited sense as to why he chose to do what he did in the circumstances. But of most importance from the city's point of view is that there's been no evidence to refute the fact that this property that we are dealing with continued to be advertised and rented after a letter was sent canceling the license. At the very least, someone who is prepared to comply with the city's rules and regulations would have ceased operating as an Airbnb pending this hearing. That is the minimum that we as the city expect. And these licenses are extraordinarily difficult to police and to gather evidence that of exactly what's going on in these premises. It would be, in my submission, a mistake for council to issue a license to someone who has already demonstrated that they are not prepared to abide by the directions of the city licensing. And that alone, in my submission, is sufficient to say that no license should issue at this time. So I suggest that there is additional evidence that Mr. Buchanan has not been a good operator. He's established two licenses created two licenses for properties that were not eligible and operated them, despite the fact that in my submission, the bylaw is clear that those were not properties that should have been allowed. In my submission, he, in all likelihood, simply attempted to run those licenses and hoped that he wouldn't get caught. And in the end, he was, and he took them down, which is to his credit. However, those were licenses that are contrary to the bylaw that were up and running. And then we have subsequent to this, the letters that were sent with respect to this license, we have a continuing pattern of non-compliance with the bylaw. And in my submission, that's sufficient for this council to not take the risk and issue a license to this particular property.
Thank you. Mr. Buchanan, this is your opportunity for some closing submissions or to reply to those comments.
You can't figure out why I pled guilty, and I've already explained that. It was to reduce conflict in our relationship. There's a court order for us to reduce our conflict. So that's why I did that. I think that's a good enough explanation. And then also, again, he's saying I'm a bad operator. I had two licenses that I voluntarily took down when I found out they were non-compliant. So the city, they may want to look at their licensing process because they're issuing licenses to anyone's name without verifying it. So I believe I should have a license. On paper, I believe I should have a license. based on everything I've said.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Buchanan.
Thank you.
At this point, we'll some discussion with the panel. Councillor Carr, you have the floor.
Thank you. I have forwarded a motion to the clerk. So I imagine that they will project that. I'll just wait for that to happen. Great, thank you. It's visible for all now. My motion is that the Vancouver City Council Business License Hearing Panel not issue a business license to Gary Buchanan for short-term rental accommodation at 414-180 East 2nd Avenue because of his conviction in provincial court on December 10th, 2021 of doing business as a short-term rental without a license, and that this conviction is sufficiently connected by the nature of the business to the requested business license at 414-180 East 2nd. So I'm forwarding this motion because, you know, I have heard Mr. Buchanan talk about maybe he shouldn't have pled guilty or not, but the reasons that he's given are related to a relationship or not understanding the implication of a a conviction in terms of then not being able to operate or to have licenses to operate short-term rentals. But he didn't talk about the substantive issue, which is that there was an Airbnb being operated without a license. I mean, that's the basis. He wasn't disagreeing with that, just the reasoning around maybe why that was happening. We've had in our submission on this matter a number of pieces of evidence which is being stated by counsel, our lawyer, Ian Dixon, regarding the number of cases of not having a license at one of the properties that Mr. Buchanan co-owns, not having a license yet listing on Airbnb, advertising on Airbnb. So there is a persistent, I think, history of operating without a license that makes me highly nervous about issuing a license when the law hasn't been followed in the past. Those are my reasons.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Do we need a seconder? Yes, we do, apparently. Councillor Boyle seconds that motion. I do have a couple comments myself. I have to agree that when we're actually looking at this specific address, there was just no evidence provided by Mr. Buchanan regarding the allegations for the business license issued to 414 of 180 East 2nd. It does concern me that this is kind of a process, while it involves multiple addresses, it's a process that's happened over 2 years. The evidence suggests to me that Mr. Buchanan was provided quite clearly that he did not have a business license for this particular address on East 2nd, yet continued to operate. He did plead guilty in December of 2021, and that's according to his own admission, let alone the evidence provided by the court documents. It is concerning that just less than a month later, there was a business license that was applied for. It was revoked in April, yet advertisements for the address were continuing in June and July. Public hearings were set, business license hearings were set, and then still, from the evidence I have, that the rental is still on Airbnb, or I guess a different Yeah, Airbnb. So it concerns me that I think a prudent person, if their defense was that they were unfairly being caught up in this bylaw, or that they just didn't know the rules, once getting this letter from the city that said you must immediately remove all online listings and advertisements, that would have happened, and there would have been a discussion. And a process would have played out determining how you could have moved forward. And like I said, there was just no evidence provided with regards to these specific allegations for the address at 180 East Second. Those are my comments. I guess clerk will move to a vote. Okay, it's unanimous. All three panel members are voting in favor of the motion. States that the panel not issue a business license to Gary Buchanan for a short-term rental accommodation at 414 180 East Second Avenue because of his conviction in provincial court on December the 10th, doing business as a short-term rental without a license. This conviction is sufficiently connected to the nature of the business and to the requested business license at 414 180 East Second Avenue. The car seconded by Councillor Boyle. We are adjourned.